Make a cheap shelter for a feral cat from a plastic tub. Video by Vladimir Kitten Project. Cut a hole in the plastic tub that a cat can fit through, no larger. You can use a jigsaw to do this, or you can probably do it with a utility knife if you don't have power tools. A plastic tub is good because it is weatherproof, but to make it warm, it needs to be insulated. This can be accomplished by fitting the inside with styrofoam. Regular white styrofoam is adequate insulation. Even better insulation is high-density styrofoam, which is often blue or pink. It is possible to glue a pair of 1-inch thick styrofoam sheets together for thicker insulation. Just be careful to use a type of glue that you will be able to cut through once it's dry so that you can still work with your styrofoam sheet. Recycling unwanted materials is a great way to keep down costs when undertaking a project. If you can get some free high-density styrofoam, it doesn't matter if it has some boot prints or dirt on it. You will need a measuring tape. You will also need a utility knife or X-Acto blade. You could saw through styrofoam with your utility knife, but it might not give you the cleanest edge. An easier and better way is to score the styrofoam with your utility knife and then snap off the piece. This method works well even with a 2-inch thick piece of styrofoam. A coping saw works well for sawing off small or awkward pieces and for rounding corners. Measure the size of the styrofoam pieces that the inside of the plastic tub will need. Insert the walls first. After the walls are in, measure what size piece you will need for the floor. The floor piece should fit snugly inside the wall pieces, and this stability at the base of the walls will hold them up. Measure what size piece you need for the shelter ceiling. It must fit snugly so that it does not collapse into the shelter. If you have extra room between the ceiling and the lid, you could fill it with another piece of styrofoam, or even odd pieces of styrofoam so that the ceiling doesn't budge and for extra heat retention. Plastic tubs become brittle if they are left out in the sun for a long time, so be careful that the handles don't break off if you revisit the shelter the next year. You will accumulate small scraps of styrofoam when cutting larger pieces and trying to get them to fit together snugly. One thing you can do is arrange the smaller pieces on the bottom of the tub and put one large piece on top of them. They won't be disturbed by the cat, and the shelter gets an extra layer of insulation. You can even do this with very small bits of styrofoam. Or, you could keep saving the scraps and watch your disabled cat crawl into a pile of them to investigate. If you have a very thin styrofoam box, putting it inside a plastic tub with styrofoam pieces around it will make it a stronger and warmer shelter. For ultra durability, you could fit a smaller plastic tub inside the inner chamber if your outer shell is large enough for it. You should cut the end off of a plastic flower pot with a pair of scissors and use that as an entrance, and put caulking around the pot on the outer shell so that cold air doesn't get into the space between the tubs. Cats like to dig their claws into styrofoam. It must be fun. If you are worried about them clawing up the floor of the shelter, one idea is to put a thin, stiff barrier between it and the occupant. You could cut a corrugated plastic sheet to sit on top of the floor piece of styrofoam, or a similar material that won't shift or curl as the shelter gets used and will still let the cats get the heat from the styrofoam. or leave the floor as is. It's up to you. In setting up your cat shelter, you can get it off of the cold ground by placing it on a wooden pallet or some other material. Here, a large wooden shipping container had been the original cat shelter, so we swept that out and slotted our new shelters inside of it. We made sure they fit snugly so that they wouldn't move if a cat leapt out of them. Seeing as the space was available, we put an extra piece of styrofoam on top of the plastic tub just to make a cozier platform in case the shelters became full but an extra cat wanted to sleep in the loft. Having the plastic tub out of direct sunlight should help keep it from becoming brittle too.